welcome to the show. Today I have a very special guest that I'm excited to chat with. Mickle, welcome. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. I'm excited to be here.
So we have a bunch of things that we sort of are interested in common, but the thing I wanted to talk to Mickle about first is an area that I'm new to and just learning about is this company called Palantir. It's been around for a while, but it doesn't seem to get a lot of the mainstream coverage that other businesses like, Ripple and XRP that we focus on. And so what I'd love to do, Mickle, is give me a little bit of a breakdown on like what is Palantir, what brought you to be interested in it, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so Palantir is a pretty complex company, and you're 100% right. They've been around for actually a very long time, around 20 years. They just went public though, and the big reason why they're kind of more prevalent now than they were before was because they really started out only in government, and as they kind of developed in government and really created one of the most intense, most complex AI projects for governments, they realized they could apply that same product to commercial, and now they're really bringing their product commercial, and it's getting a ton of attention just because of how powerful it is. Now, in terms of what it's doing, like I said, it's really complex, and I'm going to explain it in terms of an investor rather than a technologist because I've watched hundreds of hours of people explaining this company, and I can still barely wrap my head around the technicals behind it. So, from a low level, really what they're doing is they have a software that is essentially an OS. It's an operating system.
Okay.
So you see a lot of different. I don't know how much you follow SaaS companies like your Snowflakes, your Datadogs. All these essentially are pretty big companies in the market right now, and they're all data applications. So you'll put your data in there if you're a company, and it will just help your employees better understand that data. And it's a really big thing right now. Software as a service is really taking off because of reoccurring revenues. And you've probably heard the saying, data is the new oil. There's so much data out there. All these companies are producing so much data, and it's getting exponential with how much data they're producing. And companies need a way to be able to harness that data to help them make better decisions. Palantir is essentially an operating system to build these data pipelines. It's like if you thought of most of these software as a service companies, these data companies as specific applications on your computer, Palantir is really like Windows. So Palantir is where you can take all these data applications, put them in one place, and run your data through to help you make better decisions. And to explain it, and the way that really helped me better understand what Palantir was doing, in a commercial sense, what they have is a big company, a manufacturer, had 2% of their products they produced at their factory every single year being defective. And that might not seem like a lot, but that was tens to hundreds of millions of dollars every single year, and they couldn't figure out why these parts were defective. What they did was they took Palantir's software, recreated their entire company on Palantir's software, and then found out that every single month, a certain time during the day, the air conditioner was turning on. That was causing one of the extruders to malfunction, and it was causing their parts to be defective. Now, no human would have ever created the correlation between the air conditioner turning on at this time and the specific machinery going down. But Palantir's software was able to take all the data, analyze it, recreate the company in their OS, and say, okay, this is the problem. Now, what I really like to say as a simple explanation is because now people understand it better. This was way harder to explain before ChatGPT existed, but it really is like that specifically for your business, and you build your entire business inside of ChatGPT, so you just have this AI assistant looking through all your data and helping you make decisions.
This sometimes makes me think Skynet. Like this is the sort of mastermind brain behind kind of a AI takeover of the world. Is there like a dystopian angle to this, or do you think this is a beneficial thing for everyone?
I think that's really depends on how you look at it. I mean,
Okay.
if you watch a lot of what Palantir is doing, especially in the Ukraine-Russia situation, a
Okay.
lot of people are attributing Ukraine's success to Palantir software. And I really do think Palantir is going to end up becoming a Raytheon kind of situation for the US. Only at a whole new level, because for a long time we really considered fighting in wars in terms of who can build the biggest missile and who can create the biggest explosion or the fastest plane. But that's really how we thought the entire world worked for a while in terms of hard goods and stuff like that. But software has really taken over, and we kind of learned with the creation of the nuclear bomb. It's like you can only make an explosion so big before it renders itself useless because no one can use it. But Palantir's software is really bringing a whole new level of strategy to the battlefield. And just like I gave that example with how they could figure out um, which process of their manufacturing line was malfunctioning, they're using Palantir's software to map out attacks, map out counteroffensives, use it to get intelligence on the Russian side. And if you look at the breakdowns, the visuals of exactly how they're using the software, I mean, it is extremely mapped out. It looks like, I don't know, a really complex game of Risk, except with super high artificial intelligence making the calls in the background. And they're saying that's a big reason why they've been so successful in just counterattacking a lot of this stuff. So that is kind of where you could see it being a little bit dystopian. And funny enough, we were talking offline beforehand, and you mentioned, hey, is this company similar to Ripple in the sense of there's a lot more there than meets the eye? And I said yes, but it's actually the opposite. In Ripple's case, Ripple has all this adoption outside the United States, and companies are adopting it. Actually, everyone outside the United States is very scared of Palantir, and they have a really bad rep. But inside the United States, they have some very, very deep connections.
And is there data that you're aware of that Palantir is kind of collecting for the government about Americans?
So actually, this is one of the reasons why I got so bullish on Palantir. Palantir, their CEO, Alex Karp, is actually one of my favorite CEOs out there. And
Okay.
one of the best parts about Palantir is they don't actually store data. They're not a data storage company. So they
Oh,
import their software to your business, and you have their software, but you're in charge of retaining all your own data. So Palantir just
interesting.
provides you with the operating system to make decisions on your data, but they're not a data storage company fundamentally. And that's one of my favorite parts about Palantir, because data storage is one of the worst businesses you can be in today, because a lot of companies like Google, a lot of people think Google just wants to hold your data for their own personal use, but Google would rather not have your data for a lot of things. Like, yeah, Google wants to know what you're buying so they can sell you products, but Google doesn't want your credit card number, and Google doesn't want your personal information like your address, because they really can't do anything with that without getting in serious trouble, and they have to protect it at all cost or they're going to get in a lot of trouble. So data storage is a really tough situation for these companies, because they're forced to store this data because they need it, but they don't actually want to control it because controlling it's a massive headache. And that's kind of the reason why I'm so bullish on Palantir. They're able to use their software to analyze these companies' data, but they don't actually have the data, so they don't have as much of a risk from that standpoint. There's different risk in
Okay.
terms of what decisions the artificial intelligence is making with your data, but that's a whole new can of worms. Just from the data storage aspect, they're really not involved, which is actually one of my favorite parts about them.
So they're essentially just like a query tool that sits on top of whatever data set that you pointed to?
Um, yes, I would say it's a little more of a query tool because it has the artificial intelligence factor,
Got it.
which is maybe probably the most important part. I mean, the best part about Palantir is really if you took maybe you it can be used for smaller scale things. Now, I don't know if you've seen the contracts Palantir signs. They're normally $100 million a year contracts. I mean, this is no $15 a month. Most of their contracts are with 200, $300 million a year for the DoD, for all the biggest government organizations. But I mean, it would really be like if I imported all of my YouTube data into Palantir's Foundry software. It would create a virtual representation of my YouTube channel and give me the perfect thumbnail to use, give me the perfect title for how to release my video, and it would run scenarios based on my old video's performance to say this is statistically your best performing way of producing this video. So it actually
Okay.
lets you run scenarios in their software based on this representation of your business that it has in its software. So I really think of it as like it was made for governments to do strategy on counteroffensives and different things on the back end that they couldn't actually do. They had to model it out, but they had to model out with their own data. Palantir took that strategy and gave it to businesses So now businesses, say if they want to release a new product, they can have a really good idea of how that product would sell and how to market it before they even do anything with it.
Have you ever used it?
I've never used it. It's actually
Yeah.
extremely, extremely hard to use. They have been, in terms of getting your hands on it, even as a small business, like they reject people from getting it. And the big reason why, there's a lot of theories why they're rejecting people from getting it, but what they have essentially is so powerful that they have almost unlimited market for their product. And right now, they just need to be careful about people trying to copy their product. So
Okay.
right now, they're very selective with who's allowed to use it. And for commercial applications, yeah, they have more applications for people trying to get their hand on it than they're actually dishing out. So it's very unique in terms of the demand for it.
And then just this is some speculation here, but what do you think is the long-term vision for Palantir? Like, where are they going?
Yeah, I think about this a lot just as an investor. I think in terms of governments, there are going to become like the Raytheon, or they're going to become the largest defense contractor for the United States, and also for any government program. You're going to have to run your business on Palantir, or at least a competitor, because once you have some government agencies running on Palantir, I mean, you're just exponentially smarter than all the people working in those government departments who don't want to work there and are, I think we all know, aren't the best employees in the world. So once you have those employees using Palantir software to make decisions, I mean, they're 1,000x smarter than they were before just having those tools at their hand. So I really think it becomes a scenario where if you're a government agency, you almost have to run on Palantir software, or else you instantly become uncompetitive. So I think it becomes very sticky in that sense. And I think the only way that doesn't become every government agency eventually utilizing them is if there's a competitor. There will be competitors, but it's kind of like a Ripple and XRP scenario. There's competitors out there. It's just that there's a massive head start for Palantir. In the commercial aspect, I think it's a little less winner takes all, because I think big organizations like Google and Tesla are going to ultimately create their own artificial intelligence for their own company. I
Okay.
think it's kind of like Tesla now produces their own chips, and Google is starting to produce their own chips. They used to just use everyone's chips. I think Tesla and the bigger companies will ultimately come out with their own artificial intelligence. But in terms of smaller businesses and businesses that will just never have the know-how to create
Mhm.
artificial intelligence, I think Palantir is really going to be the mass market to that. And I really do think of it almost as what Nvidia is doing for chips, how their chips are in every single device on Earth. But if you're a big enough company, you can make your own chips. I think Palantir is going to kind of fit that same role, only for artificial intelligence.
Now, one of the things that interested me in Palantir was the connection to PayPal Mafia and Peter Thiel. Do you have any insights on sort of that side of things?
I have insights, but not specifically from deep connections. One of the interesting things was Peter Thiel was the first one to really get Palantir going,
Okay.
and very quickly, because of Peter Thiel's, let's say, not so, he's not that well liked by certain sectors of our government. So they
Okay.
very quickly switched Peter Thiel out with this guy Alex Karp, who has a much different political view than Peter Thiel, if you can see where I'm going with this. And it made
Interesting.
it a very interesting connection, because suddenly Palantir went from being this villainized company in the United States to being one of the biggest contractors in our military for software. So you have very deep ties on both sides. In terms of connections to outside stuff, honestly, I think the connections for Palantir are a lot more obvious than what's happening with something like Ripple and XRP. I mean, Palantir is pretty straight up. I mean, you can see they have extremely deep ties in our government, and you see a lot of big companies now starting to work with Palantir as well. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw companies like Tesla starting to use them. And other countries are now becoming a lot more accepting to what Palantir is doing. I think I think AI is actually a lot more accepted in today's day and age than cryptocurrency. So I think you just see a lot more businesses and governments just outright saying, "Yeah, we're working with Palantir." So I haven't found anything like some weird connection that you wouldn't expect. It's more just there's really deep connections inside the government, and they'll just tell you that's what's happening.
I mean, AI has exploded in the last like 3 or 4 months. It's was not really something discussed on the mainstream, end of last year, and now it's just everywhere, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think it kind of played, and it's funny because Palantir really beat all the AI companies to it by a long shot. They just aren't a hype company. They're not this company who's running around talking about AI. I mean, they've been doing this. They've been working with the government, and the government has had tools so much more sophisticated than anything the mainstream is talking about with ChatGPT. But Palantir just wasn't in the position to go around blowing that up. I mean, they're a government contractor. They want to be very conservative with what they're running around telling people. But from what I understand, everything that people have been freaking out about with ChatGPT and all that AI stuff, I mean, that's just nothing compared to what Palantir has been doing for the last 10 to 15 years. It's just that the market really just hasn't figured out how much of this has already been released to some of the most powerful people in the world and how much they've already been leveraging this. And I just think now it's going to be one of those scenarios where now that people are looking at it more and people are focusing on like, wow, what is this really doing behind the scenes? I think you're going to see it really explode. And like I kind of said before, once you have one or two companies that start using Palantir's operating system to manage their own data, it becomes a scenario where you become uncompetitive if you're not using it, and you put your own business at risk if you're not adopting that. It's the same way with Ripple and XRP. I mean, if you have companies all over the US starting to move money instantaneously around the world and they don't have to pay fees on it, and you can do it interoperably with any other country, I mean, you're just going to be at a massive disadvantage if you're still using Swift to send payments. And these are such massive upgrades in technology, and they're so broad based in who could use them. They're platforms. They're not very tailored to one specific use case. I mean, these are business changing ideas that any business or government can adopt. It always starts with people adopting it slow and people being scared of what is going to change in their business. But once kind of the front runners get involved and start adopting it, you really quickly become at a disadvantage if you don't jump in with them.
Now, another connection with this sort of PayPal mafia is Elon Musk and this new migration to the X.com app via Twitter. Have you found any connections between Palantir and Musk and Twitter?
I know Musk and Peter Thiel are still friends, and I have seen domains for Tesla under Palantir before that I'm not sure are active yet, but it looks like Tesla has been at least working with Palantir on the background. I haven't seen anything for Twitter, and um, I don't have enough of a vision of what Elon Musk wants X to be for me to understand if Palantir would necessarily be the best place I could see Palantir being useful for Twitter would be if, and I know Elon Musk is going to do this, I just don't know how he's going to do it. Eventually, what Twitter really is it's the largest personalized data source in the entire world for how humans think and how humans interact. So eventually, Elon Musk is going to want to take all that data, right, and import it into his learning modules at Tesla. I don't know if you've seen Tesla's Optimus robot, but it's essentially a humanoid robot. Twitter's data is going to be absolutely critical into making Optimus more human-like. And to analyze and get all that data in a funneled way for Optimus and the engineers at Tesla to understand, he's going to need some kind of platform to break down all the data from Twitter and be able to put it into a humanoid robot. I think Palantir could be a very interesting software to help make that happen because, I mean, you just need analyzing all the data ever created on Twitter is just something humans just can't do. You're going to need a very powerful platform to do that. And you just be able to, I mean, as stuff as simple as a picture with a stop sign in it and it's saying stop sign, and having that funneling through Tesla's humanoid robot and having it start to create those neural links on how humans think, how humans behave with each other, how humans look at the outside world. I mean, that's really what I think the point in getting Twitter really was. And then you have Palantir as the middle ground to help digest that data. And that's really the biggest connection or the most useful way I could see him using Palantir and X.com. to help organize the data rather than any kind of specific changes to how users would use the app.
Because if you think about the volume of data that is provided to Twitter on a daily basis about how people feel about things, how they react to things. I mean, if you wanted to create a fake person, you'd have to understand human emotional response and how interactions go on. So you're right. Like that would be a very cool, kind of freaky use for Palantir, is to summarize that to the point where you could program a robot to act like a person.
Well, that's exactly it, and you just nailed it, because that's the biggest thing. For these artificial intelligence programs to work, they need data, and it's really hard to create. You don't want to be creating new human data to train these things on when you have massive repositories of all this data just sitting there. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Elon Musk is currently suing Microsoft for training their artificial intelligence programs on Twitter's data, because he's saying that's his data that he wants to train his programs on. So it just goes to show that this isn't something that, we're just theorizing on right here. Like, Elon Musk is currently in a lawsuit with Microsoft trying to stop them from taking the Twitter users' data and training their artificial intelligence programs on it. And it's not because he thinks that's like something that shouldn't be happening. He wants all the data for himself so he can train his artificial intelligence programs on it. And it just fits in perfectly to what he's going to need his products to do in the future. Like, eventually he's going to want it so your phone is directly hooked up with your Tesla car and you don't have to even think about driving your car anywhere. Your car is just going to want to know where you want to be based on your daily schedule. And it's going to know all these different things of where to bring you and all kinds of scheduling things. And it's all going to be run on data from Twitter and helping understand how humans think. And it's just going to be so crazy what it's able to do with digesting all this data. And it's really going to be a war over who can use this data the best.
I mean, we're at an early stage, but every time I get in my car, Apple Maps knows where I'm going, and it's not the same thing every day. It's like, wow, you really have memorized my habits to a freaky point. But this
I noticed that too, actually, and that's one of those things Apple does on the background that they won't even announce. It just kind of subtly pushes it in front of you, and you're like, wait, how did you know I was going there?
like it's Tuesday. I haven't been to this other place all week. Weird. So the other thing that this kind of brings up for me is this formerly sci-fi futuristic idea that we would have these like android people who eventually are so similar to people, like if you've seen the Blade Runner movies, that it creates this issue of like, do those fake people have rights? Like, should they be allowed to vote or do other things that humans have rights for? It gets a slippery slope when they can use Twitter type data to become so emotionally intelligent that they have feelings and debates and reactions to things that usually are part of the human experience only.
Yeah, have you seen Tesla's new Optimus robot?
I have not.
Okay, so it's a humanoid robot, and
Okay.
it's at very early stages right now. I mean, it can walk around.
Does it
It's
talk?
more of I don't think it talks yet, but I'm sure that would be one of the right now. It seems like they're really focusing on motor controls, and it's kind of like limps around right now. It doesn't have the
I think I have
finest
seen
motor.
this actually.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I think in the next 5 years you're gonna see that really starting to scale mass market, and I think these things are gonna move a lot faster than people expect. And judging by how our government works in creating common sense regulations for this stuff, I anticipate it being a massive problem.
I mean, I've been waiting my whole life for Rosie from the Jetsons to come clean my house. But I'll be curious if we get that robot and now all of a sudden I have like issues with making sure I'm paying the robot enough and am I hurting the robot's feelings? like things
Yeah, well,
that,
Elon Musk was even saying he's like, yeah, if like this is done correctly, I think it's going to be way bigger business for us than our cars. And he was saying, I think most households will have one or two of these robots doing their daily tasks for them. And it really is crazy, because it would, people think about stuff like that and they're like, oh, it's going to completely disrupt all our jobs and we're going to have nothing to do. But oh my God, if I had someone doing my laundry for me, cooking for me, like all this stuff, and it was a robot, like how much more time I would have to do super productive things. Like I waste so much time in a normal day just doing mundane tasks, driving from place to place. I mean, I think it would be absolutely incredible for how productive we would be, and I think it would give us all a lot more free time too. So I'm very interested in it. Obviously, it has to be done in a way that maximizes security, and you don't have all these crazy Terminator robots running around. But I don't know. I'm a big Elon Musk fanboy. I've been pretty impressed with everything he's been able to do up until this point. Actually, before I got into Ripple and XRP, I was an investor in Tesla back from 2017 to 2018, and I've always been kind of a fan with what Elon Musk has been doing. So I trust that he's going to figure it out. There's been very few scenarios in my times following Elon Musk where I'm just like, wow, he really got that wrong. Normally, it looks like he gets something wrong and then he ends up getting it right.
So Sam Altman testified recently about the need for regulations around AI. What's your take on why Elon Musk really left OpenAI?
So funny enough, he didn't. I actually saw an interview with him the other day breaking this down, and his point was, I didn't really leave OpenAI. He's like, I thought Google and DeepMind were so far ahead of OpenAI. He's like, I just stopped paying attention to it. He's like, I didn't think there was any way this small little startup was gonna create what it did, and he essentially just said he lost focus on it and kind of thought, hey, like this is a moonshot scenario that this company will ever be able to compete with the likes of Google or Microsoft in their AI ambitions, just because Google had something called DeepMind going in the background for the last 15 years where they were creating what was supposed to be the most advanced artificial intelligence platform by a long shot. And they were doing big things behind the scenes in terms of analyzing genomes and all kinds of crazy projects in terms of genetics. And everyone just thought DeepMind was so far ahead that OpenAI was just going to, it was going to be some cool project, but it was just too small. They didn't have the resources of Google. So essentially, Elon Musk just kind of stopped paying attention to it. And behind the scenes, they created something extremely powerful. And I think it was almost just like a kind of a miscalculation on his part, not understanding that they were actually going to pull off what he thought wasn't really possible. But you're right, he did fund OpenAI. He gave them, I think he said it was like $40 million. He said OpenAI wouldn't be around right now if it wasn't for him. And I think he's not too happy at the fact that he started it off as a nonprofit, and now they're for profit sold out to Microsoft. So that seems to be the problem he seems to be the thing he has a gripe with.
I mean, OpenAI or ChatGPT is a great example of a tipping point where you have all sorts of things, and then some brands just like catapult into the mainstream at an accelerated rate.
Yeah, I think there was a great example of opening up our eyes to, because like I said, the government and some of these big businesses have been using much more powerful programs with Palantir behind the scenes. But it's so funny once us retail folks get like a touch of what ChatGPT is doing, our minds are like blown, and we're like, this is the most powerful thing on earth. Meanwhile, it's been happening, and I think that's kind of the cool kind of story going on behind the scenes. I mean, ChatGPT has so much attention because we're finally getting to see it. We're finally getting to use this stuff and play with it, and it just really makes you wonder what has already been done or what is already being worked on that we just don't even know about.
I actually spent quite a bit of time this week learning about various prompts and kind of how to train ChatGPT to do what you want. So there still, I think, is a human need for making the request of the AI and positioning it in a way that it can deliver. You can't be vague. You have to be very specific. But it's mind blowing when if you learn how to do these prompts and get these. I'm doing it for like marketing stuff. Get these things written for you. It's like insane how accurate and knowledgeable it is.
Yeah, it's funny too where its shortfalls are. So I have two examples of very similar things you think it would handle really well, and it does them both very differently. So I had to try to write a tweet for me, and I gave it some of my other tweets, and make this tweet sound like me, and it sounded like a robot wrote it. It was like, XRP will go up in 2023 and like hashtag blockchain. And I was like, all right, well, this sucks. But then I inputted it, and I have the videos on my YouTube channel. I said, hey, write me a story about how XRP gains mass adoption in the United States, and it wrote me this eloquent story of like this just super cool, well told kind of like history of XRP being used by the banks and like why they're using it, and it was really really well done. And I just put some AI voice over it and put some music to it, and it made like an amazing video. So I just thought it was interesting. It was like really really good at this like making up a story and storytelling, but it wasn't as good as trying to simulate a human, which is just weird to me. It's like it can be so good in some aspects, but it lacks in other places.
I kind of, my take on it now is it's like an autistic nerd who very smart, can follow directions, but when I've asked it to be funny and witty, like it doesn't get
Exa-
that.
exactly, and it's not good at human simulation right now. But I mean, this thing is we're just scratching the surface. Like I think if we did this interview again in a year, we'd be sitting back and saying, "Yep, it nails that now."
But that's where Twitter comes in. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of humor and wit. I mean, there's, short tweets. It's harder to be funny in a short amount of space. And so if Twitter can train the AI, that's amazing and scary and remarkable.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were when Elon Musk first bought. People were analyzing that purchase of Twitter purely based on what amount of revenues Twitter is currently making, but it is the largest data source of how humans think on Earth. And not only that, but you have interactions below the original tweet too. So like it's not even going to analyze just based on someone saying a certain thing like, oh, that one perspective is how human thinks, but it can then look at the interactions to that original thing that person said, and the AI can understand like, hey, this person said this, but most people disagreed with this person saying this. So it's literally a map out of the human brain for artificial intelligence to break down and analyze, and it's across history too. It's going to be really powerful, and that's just the data that's been created so far. I mean, Twitter is getting more users every single day. There's more people tweeting. I tell people all the time, I'm like, you cannot run a public company anymore. You cannot be a CEO without having Twitter, and that just shows how powerful of a platform it is.
One of the key things to humans, in my opinion, is how we react to things. I mean, we react emotionally, we get defensive, we like sometimes attack, like we can be hurt. Like there's all these emotions that are part of a response. And Twitter is a perfect place to see those, right? Somebody tweets something and you see all these reactions, which if you wanted to program AI, like to me, that's a key part of emotional intelligence is understanding how others react to things. So if I wanted to like persuade you to do something and I was a robot, like I have to understand in advance how you're going to react to things that I say, things that I do. And Twitter is incredible for that.
No, exactly. Like we talk about topics all the time, and like even on my YouTube channel, I have to be careful about where I cross a line or where a line where people aren't going to want me to talk about something or comment on something. And those lines are pretty much impossible to code into AI. What you really need to do is you need to analyze history, analyze how people interact with each other, and there's still going to be that line, but by analyzing how people react in the past and what a typical reaction is to going to a certain area, I mean, that's to me the best way you could train an artificial intelligence program on, hey, where might a boundary be, rather than saying, hey, you can't talk about this subject because you're not allowed to talk about this subject. Rather saying, okay, well, people react like this when you present this topic in this way, but it seems to get a better response if you present it in this other way, which I think is a kind of an interesting avenue that, I don't know, I think a lot of people automatically go to the super dystopian stuff with this. Sometimes I think it's kind of interesting to say, how could this be better than what we're dealing with right now? And right now we really just deal with an engineer on the back end saying, I mean, you look at Twitter files and stuff like that saying, boom, you're not allowed to talk about this like this. But if you have a highly advanced AI that can actually understand motive and the context of what you're doing, and this could be done in a good or bad way, it could do a better job of bridging that line.
And there's things to language too, like subtext or innuendo or kind of implying things that are very subtle. Like I know if you're not a native language speaker for a language, it's hard to understand those things sometimes. So to be able to teach AI to understand like what am I saying that I'm not really saying? Like that type of complex language is remarkable. But for the
Yeah,
dystopian thing, I kind of had a very dark view on this until I read this most of this book called Singularity, that is actually a paints a picture that AI is somewhat benevolent and that, it kind of will, in his view, treat us like its creator and this sort of loving relationship where it wants to help and serve versus take over and like kill us all kind of thing.
in my opinion, a lot of people put too much thought in the AI itself being the thing that is going to bring down humanity. But I think if it does come down to like AI being this mass issue, it's not going to be the AI doing it itself. It's going to be the people behind the scenes controlling it that caused it to go down that road. And that's why I'm more in line with, as long as you have people like Elon Musk like leading the forefront, and as long as he doesn't turn into some crazy person, which I guess is possible. I don't know. I have a slightly more optimistic view for
Okay.
where we're headed, but I think if there was other very powerful people in charge of doing it that I wasn't as confident in, I'd be a little more worried about where we were headed.
I mean, that's true that a tool is a tool. It's up to the user of the tool to decide if they're going to use that hammer to kill someone or to build a house.
Yeah, I think we're a lot further out of that tool creating, becoming its own thing and acting on its own. I think we're a lot further out than that. Than that's normally where people go to for how this will go bad. But I think there's a lot of steps between where we are now and that point.
But there is this crazy thing of these humanoids that have consciousness and independence and don't feel like they answer to authority. That's where that gets a little freaky. Where, I saw the Alien movies many times, including when I was a kid. And, one of the main characters in there is like a robot type who, for all intents and purposes, is kind of treated like a member of the team, like another person, which
Yeah,
create.
yeah. It's funny. I say far out, and I can totally see that. Like, who knows what we're going to be seeing in terms of 20 to 30 years? I mean, most of what we're talking about will probably be. We say it's 20 to 30. It could be 10.
Think about how much easier the military would be to manage if they were all programmed robots who didn't need sick leaves, didn't have children, they didn't need retirement accounts. Like,
Yeah, that reminds me of a book I read a long time ago. It was just all these video game people, all these people are so good at video games. I mean, ultimately, they could just be used to control robots on the back end for military purposes, which is kind of a dark way to look at it. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to get to a point where it doesn't make sense to send humans into battle because you could just have a human controlling a humanoid robot on the back end, and you just have essentially people gaming in real life kind of combat scenarios.
was that Ender's Game?
God, I don't even think I don't think I remember it, but
Ender's Game is almost like a kid's book that I read as an adult, but it's sort of that idea this young kid is playing video games, but it's really actually real world. It's like these drone guys, right? Who like are good gamers who can fly these drones everywhere, but who have military applications.
exactly. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Ripple and XRP. Before we fully break from Palantir, is there any connections that you know of between the markets that Ripple serves and Palantir's markets?
So I know for a fact that Ripple could use Palantir software in very, very interesting ways, and I
Okay.
know they could use it especially when it comes to creating liquidity pairs and creating best routing of trades and just all kinds of like most efficient pathways for payments and corridors. Now, I've been pressing David Schwartz on this kind of consistently because I really do think that would be just one of the best partnerships, like in terms of how they would help each other. I just think it would be do so many cool things for Ripple on the back end in terms of managing liquidity and creating these like corridors that are illiquid but finding these really crazy routes to help create pairs for how to route these trades. Now, I don't know if this means that it something is there or it's not there, but typically if I reach out to him enough, he'll answer my question. This is one that he's refused to talk about on any circumstances, which I think is interesting. Um, Other than that, I really don't have anything. I think they
Okay.
would make. I think it would make sense that it makes sense to me why Ripple would want to use Palantir because it fits into what they're doing perfectly. Um, I I think we'll just have to wait and see.
One of the areas that I cover is the tokenization of the supply chain because that will dramatically increase efficiency of how products are moved. Do you see Palantir being part of these supply chain routes and helping shippers figure out the most efficient way to move things?
Yeah, actually that's actually a perfect application for it. It's one of those applications where you have so many moving parts at once, so much data all coming in at one place, and having a human go through all that data. Like typically for these, they're called just-in-time supply chains. You have all this data, all these products all coming in at once, and you have to make sure everything lines up perfectly to kind of move the supply chain along in the right way. And there really is just like for all intensive purposes, there's like a right answer to how these things need to be put together, or there's a very clear best path. It's not a lot of opinion. There's not a lot of, hey, maybe this would be the best way to do it. Like a lot of times, there's a way that it should be executed. And I think that's the perfect application for something like Palantir. Right now, one of the biggest use cases for Palantir is actually in hospitals and being the back
Okay.
end service for hospitals. And I mean, hospitals, think of how much stuff is coming in and out of hospitals in terms of medical equipment. It really is like its own kind of supply chain in a hospital. And that is a perfect application right there. I could definitely see it being used for something like that.
Would you speculate that companies like UPS use Palantir to manage their shipping stuff?
They could already be partners. I haven't looked at an up to date list on exactly who is using it, but I would I would not be. The only reason why a place like UPS wouldn't be using Palantir right now would just be because they don't get it yet, and they're not as up to date on how AI could transform their business. I'm not positive if they're working together right now, but I would say that within the next 5 years, I would put a pretty good chance on they are working together.
So we had some, let's go back to Ripple for a sec. We had some interesting Ripple news this week. Really PR about CBDC platform being run on the XRP ledger. What's your sort of take on how this is going to impact the world of money?
Well, I think this whole thing is, first of all, incredible that we're getting these announcements in the middle of the Ripple SEC case.
Okay.
I am so excited to see what gets announced once this case is over, because one of the stipulations in this case was that one of the SEC's main arguments was like, hey, like Ripple, if you're announcing stuff and XRP's price goes up, like that's not a good look for you. Obviously, that's not the exact argument, but instantly what came to my head was, hey, Ripple's got to be conservative with what they announce, because if they go out and say, hey, the Federal Reserve is going to use XRP for cross-border payments, obviously that would cause a skyrocket in the price. So I know for a fact Ripple has had to be conservative over these last 2 years with announcements, because one of the SEC's direct things that they said in their case was like, hey, your announcement shouldn't lead to the increase of XRP's price. So I think what we're seeing right now is kind of just like small things that Ripple's like, all right, like we'll throw this out there, we'll throw this out there, we'll make this public. But whenever they make an announcement of like, hey, with Bhutan, it's never like, oh yeah, this is our main project right now. It's like, oh well, we have like a lot more going on behind the scenes. We just can't comment on it yet. And yeah, I'm really excited because one, it really validates what Ripple has been trying to do with XRP. One of the things that I was skeptical at first when I was first getting into this space was like, hey, you have this really good public blockchain, and like, hey, you have this like really good asset and this company helping get adoption, but are companies actually going to want to use this digital asset, or are they going to want their own in-house solution? And I think what we're seeing now is it's really a hybrid. They're using a private version of the XRP ledger, but they're using that private version of the XRP ledger because they want to be able to hook up to the public ledger. And that just goes into perfectly what Ripple's been wanting to do with this Internet of Value the entire time. And I don't. It just looks to me like the perfect setup of exactly what I've kind of expected for this whole thing to play out. And it's the same thing I was talking about earlier with Palantir. You get these small companies starting to use the XRP ledger, and then suddenly the US says like, hey, like you need to send us this money, hey, we need to send you this money. It's like, okay, well, we have our currency tokenized on the XRP ledger, like can we send you our currency on the XRP ledger? And suddenly the US government's like, okay, well, we need an account on the XRP ledger to take this transfer. And it just starts webbing out like that. Suddenly they start getting transfers from these smaller countries. These countries are interacting with other small countries, and they're like, hey, why are we using this system that takes 4 to 5 days for this payment to go through, and why are we paying this massive fee on it when I could send you $10 billion over the XRP ledger in 3 seconds? And I think that's really how we start spider webbing outwards. There was a very early Ripple member who said, once you get one major bank on the network and another bank gets on the network and starts interacting with that, the spider web effect starts. And I think we're really starting to see that play out right now.
Yeah, I can sorry. I can.
No, it's so funny. I saw it slowly going down.
Yeah, I don't even know which one it is. Anyway, I often move those around, and sometimes they're precariously propped up a little bit. So I think that point is that we're going to see like a tipping point, just like with ChatGPT, right? Where growth is slow, and then something big will happen, and then there'll be a group of people who are like, if you are one of the few not using the XRP ledger, you are now going to be left behind or have some other type of consequence.
Yeah, and people always ask me like, oh, like what makes you say it's going to be like XRP versus like XLM or these other ones? And it's so funny because people always have like these different ideas for what makes like this other digital asset like as important. But I mean, I just don't see anything really even close. Like the closest thing I really see is like maybe XLM or Ethereum, but I think Ethereum has massive problems, and I won't even go to like the gas fees and stuff, but you essentially, the way their consensus mechanism works, you have front running, and like you cannot have a system where CBDCs are being used that allows front running. I mean, that's just like a very, very basic thing that institutions won't have. I mean, imagine if every single time an institution wanted to cut off another institution from making a transfer, they just paid a $10,000 network fee. I mean, it's just a flaw in the system. And then something like XLM, while it has the technology to compete with what XRP is, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's the same exact thing. You just don't have the stellar team forming any connections. You don't have anyone working with central banks in the capacities Ripple's doing. So I just see Ripple and XRP as this perfect hybrid of not only a very efficient digital asset, but also just like an all-star team with what Ripple has assembled. They have David Schwartz and these great engineers creating these great technological solutions, but you also have like former VPs of like MasterCard and Visa and Rosie Rios and like BlackRock former officials, and it's like you just don't have that caliber of people at like Stellar or like the Algorand Foundation. Like they might have like one or two big hitters on their platform, but you can't really compare. I mean, I really do think about it as like Ripple really is positioned right now to be like the Google of Web 2, and then like I think a lot of these other companies are going to have like great products, and there's going to be other companies that come in and have great products. I just see Ripple as like such a big front runner in this field right now.
So do you see them as competitors? I'm talking about Stellar versus or XLM versus XRP, or are they complementary and going after different markets?
No, I think they're direct competitors. I see a lot of people. I think a lot of people overanalyze like these documents that say like XLM's for retail and XRP is for like institutions, and I see a lot of those documents come out from organizations like, I don't know, like they're like hidden in like BIS documents and like IMF documents. But it's actually really funny because I was actually in a Twitter space with someone who actually is like interning for those places, and he's like, yeah, like a bunch of interns get together and they like write those documents as a project and no one ever reads them. You know, like there's people I think in like the XRP community who like dig through those documents and take it as like, oh, the head person at the BIS has this like master plan for XRP to be used for this. And I mean, honestly, like I hate to say it because like, I mean, I've put probably more in some of those documents than I should have, but I think once in a while, like they could mean something, but I think a lot of it is just like, oh, like this is what one person at this organization thought was going to be the way this rolled out. But then it turns out, oh, that person was studying blockchain for the first time this summer. at the end of the day, Ripple and XRP are the same thing. I mean, they do exactly the same thing. They're both really efficient digital assets for transfers. There's no fundamental difference why one should be used for retail and one should be used for institutions. And I just think if you told Ripple today, hey, I heard you're only going to be used, or if you told anyone using the XRP ledger, hey, you can't make a retail platform using XRP because that's what XLM is going to be used for. I mean, some developer would laugh and be like, all right, well, I'm going to make, that's the perfect opportunity for me to create whatever XLM's retail uses for XRP. And I don't know if you ever used a Lobster wallet for XLM. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like 99% scams. Like, you can't even find like a real project on it. So it's just not something like, I mean, I get flack kind of a lot from people like saying like, oh, you're missing this and this with XLM. I see why people get excited, but in the shadow of XRP, it seems like it's more of, hey, XLM will do good because it has this artificial pathway that this community created for it to have a place in the future financial system, rather than anything I'm directly seeing out of Stellar to make that path happen. Like, there's no Venmo using XLM that Stellar released to say, oh, this is why Stellar will be used for retail payments. Now, if Venmo and PayPal partnered with XLM and said, we're going to use XLM as the rails for the next Venmo, then I could say, oh, maybe this whole narrative about retail using XLM was actually real. But until I see anything besides a BIS document saying XLM's for retail, it's just like, well, I see Ripple's building CBDCs with central banks, and I see massive institutions using XRP. So you don't have to convince me that XRP is going to be used by institutions, but I need to see more than someone just telling me XLM is going to be used by retail, because right now I don't see anyone in retail using XLM.
The reason I wouldn't even go with bullish, but I'm confident there is something to do with XLM and retail is their relationship with Stripe, who processes a vast majority of online transactions. So if we are going to move to this almost fully e-commerce world, and Stripe is going to have to move to digital assets, and they want to be country agnostic, would using XLM make sense for them?
Stripe is a great point, and that's one that I didn't have off the top of my head. I think Stripe is an interesting one in terms that they hold all that XLM. Now, I haven't seen a single product from Stripe of them integrating the XLM that they have. Now, they very well could, and there could be some plan for Stripe on the back end. And I really do think that is a great point in showing that there is some interest for retail for Stripe. But, yeah, for me, I'd probably just still need to see, like, when is Stripe going to release a product using XLM for settlement? I know MoneyGram is doing something with XLM.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, XLM will get part of the market. Like, XLM will have applications built on it, and they'll probably be used by some pretty big institutions as well. Like, I'm sure big money remittance companies are going to use XLM. I guess I just don't see as much of a barrier in terms of what they could be used for. I think they could be used for the same thing at the end of the day. And my personal prediction would be XRP gets most of the market, but I do have XLM in my portfolio as that hedge as well.
One thing I've just observed with not quite ready to pass judgment is whether this feud between Jed McCaleb and the other Ripple guys was fake so that they could create two entities and avoid monopoly restrictions. If XRP did everything, you're kind of going to come under scrutiny. But if you split it into two pretend halves, then you're like, oh, look, we compete. There's no monopoly here.
I've thought the same exact thing before in the past, and I definitely don't have anything that would convince me that wasn't the case. I think maybe there are some small things like court documents in terms of like him dumping all his XRP, and from what I understand about actually Jed McCaleb and XLM, and I could be wrong, but I heard he's not even that. What I heard about Jed McCaleb from people is that he's a super, super smart guy, and he loves to build stuff, but he's not a guy that really, like, is there and, like, hangs around and is, like, hyper-focused. Like, he likes to get things started, and then, like, he's off doing something else. So, like, I don't know even how involved he necessarily is with XLM at the current point. I know they really have that one lady, I forgot her name, really
Danelle Dixon?
really leading the Stellar project, and
Right.
it seems like She seems pretty good to me. I just don't really know. I don't really hear anything from Jed McCaleb anymore.
So I have a Google alert on Jed McCaleb. I see what he's up to every day. So he's a software developer. He's a computer programmer. He's a founder. I think he likes to build stuff. That is rarely the qualities that a CEO has. So it doesn't surprise me that he comes in, builds stuff, and then he's out because his role is done. What he's doing now, from what I read, is managing and building VAST, which is a space station thing.
Yeah, I did see that actually. Yeah, that was definitely interesting. And like I said, in terms of, I mean, that was definitely a big connection in terms of, I think, SpaceX directly just shouted out Vast, which, I mean, that's one of those perfect examples where I could sit here and I could say, oh, like, I don't necessarily see why, or I don't see any connections that XLM currently has at the moment. But if you're willing to say, oh, well, maybe SpaceX in the future will leverage XLM into some sort of deal in there to send money through, obviously, some of those networks, I mean, that is a potential connection. I think a lot of the stuff for XLM right now is stuff like that where you see this like very interesting network happening behind the scenes. I just, I just haven't seen any as large scale projects as Ripple has at the moment, but I think that's definitely an interesting one too. That was something I saw and I was like, oh, you got to imagine that at some point XLM would play into that.
Because you look at these guys who are they're friends and they're building these massive companies with huge budgets, and they all connect. I mean, this is why Palantir is now on my list. And you have the Google guys are friends. We have Elon Musk, and we have Sam Altman. We have Jed McCaleb. And so, if the goal is to sort of have these space stations, one, people are going to work on them, so they need to get paid in something. Is that what XLM is for? You're going to need probably robot people on there to work, and they have to be programmed by some AI. So I think there's some synergy with a lot of these, Silicon Valley guys who have built these incredible businesses.
It is fascinating how they all seem to stick together and they like start something together and then they all like break apart and they all go in different directions, and you find out like, oh, he's on the board of this and he's working with this company. Yeah, I mean, the way I really think about it in terms of where we're going in the future of digital assets is like you really have your digital assets that are like for money, for payments, and it's really just traditional financial system stuff. And then, like, that is where I think XRP, Bitcoin, and XLM really kind of have this very unique path paved out for them. And I think you could almost even put as in almost like a funny way of like Doge in that application. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of digital assets that are going to have this like value kind of reason. Like the real reason XRP is going to be so important in our financial system is just because we need a really good way to move value, and we need a good way to move money all around the world in a very efficient way, and we need massive liquidity pools in the digital asset ecosystem. And it just seems like XRP is this super liquid digital asset that's going to be perfect for like a digital financial system. I think we're going to have XRP as like that as the perfect role for it, but I don't think we're going to have a ton of other digital assets like JP Morgan coin and all these other things also being used in similar ways. I think a lot of the other digital assets come from like applications, like things solving different problems in the ecosystem, things like Flare that's really like connecting blockchains, things like Chainlink that are focused on pulling data, things like Uniswap that are focused on like swapping tokens. I think you're going to have a lot of applications like that, but in terms of traditional financial system activities, and like I think those will congregate into things like the XRPs and the XLMs, and I think that's kind of what we've seen. I mean, whenever you see institutions working with a digital asset, there's really not too many that are gaining big institutional eyeballs. Typically, every single time, it's either Ethereum, XRP. You could throw XLM in there, Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is really just holding for treasury stake. And then you might see something like Polygon, but I think that kind of gets thrown into Ethereum. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But like you said with the CBDC thing, I think Ripple's really positioning XRP perfectly as being this thing, because all these other digital assets are so focused on like, hey, like you just use the network and you figure out how to make it use for you. Ripple's really going in there with the software of saying, hey, we're going to make this nice and easy for you. You're going to look at this and you're going to see a normal payment UI. You're going to see, hey, send this payment to this person, and we're going to make all the digital asset stuff work on the back end so you don't even have to think about it. And that's honestly, for me, the thing that I really, really, really like about Ripple's strategy in gaining this mass adoption. They're not going to these institutions and saying like, oh well, like this is some decentralized cryptocurrency. Like you just hold all your tokens in a wallet and you just have to like say like, oh sorry, it's like fluctuating like this. Like no, they're saying like, hey, you have your fiat currency here. It stays as fiat currency. You'll send it to this other person, it will transform into midair, and when they get their currency, it will be in a stable currency, and you don't even have to worry about having this volatile asset in the middle. Like all that is taken care of you for you, and I really do think that's how we get mass adoption in this industry. I think XRP is the digital asset that can sit in the middle and get all that done, and I just think Ripple's business strategy outside of attracting some angry regulators has been almost spot on in making it happen.
Wow, what an amazing summary. Mickle, you are a wealth of knowledge. So if anybody's watching this who doesn't happen to know much about you, what's the best way to follow you, see, read, watch your stuff?
On Twitter, it's XRP Mickle, and then I think it's the same thing on YouTube. But I upload videos every single day. I'm on Twitter way more than I should be. So if you if you want to keep up with me, feel free to reach out to me there. And hopefully pretty soon I'll have some more ways to do some more community stuff as well. So excited to
Awesome.
get some of that going. And yeah, it was awesome coming on the show, Molly. We definitely have to do this more often. It was a ton of fun.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.